Maize, known in many places as corn, looks so familiar that it is easy to underestimate it. We see it as yellow kernels on a cob, as popcorn in a bowl, as tortillas, grits, corn syrup, animal feed, and even fuel. But maize is not just another crop. It is one of the most successful plants humans have ever shaped. Today, the world produces more maize by weight than wheat or rice, making it the largest grain crop on the planet. Its rise is unusual because maize is deeply dependent on people. Unlike many wild grasses that scatter their seeds naturally, maize keeps its kernels tightly packed on an ear. That makes it useful for harvest, but poor at spreading itself without human help. In other words, maize became powerful not by surviving alone, but by entering into a long partnership with human societies. The story begins about 9,000 years ago in southern Mexico, where indigenous peoples domesticated maize from a wild grass called teosinte. At first glance, teosinte does not look much like modern corn. Its seed structures are small, hard, and sparse compared with the full ears we recognize today. Yet through careful selection over many generations, people favored plants with larger kernels, more useful ears, and traits that made them easier to grow and harvest. This was not a single invention in one season. It was a long biological transformation guided by observation, patience, and practical need. Every saved seed was a decision. Over centuries, those decisions turned a wild grass into a crop capable of supporting villages, trade, ritual life, and eventually entire civilizations. Maize became central to life in Mesoamerica not only because it was productive, but because it fit into a broader agricultural system. One famous example is the three sisters, maize, beans, and squash grown together. This was more than a symbolic trio. The maize stalks provided support for climbing beans. Beans helped enrich the soil by adding nitrogen through their relationship with soil microbes. Squash spread across the ground, shading the soil, helping retain moisture and reducing weeds. Together, they formed a balanced food system and a practical farming strategy. Maize supplied calories, beans added protein, and squash contributed vitamins and storage value. This kind of polyculture shows that early farmers were not simply planting whatever grew. They were designing resilient systems from deep ecological knowledge. As maize spread through the Americas, it became more than a staple food. In many pre-Columbian societies, it carried sacred meaning. Maize was deified, represented in sculpture, and connected to ideas of creation, fertility, and survival. That spiritual status makes sense when we remember how central it was to daily life. A crop that feeds a community does not remain just a plant. It becomes part of identity, calendar, ritual, and political power. When harvests were strong, communities could grow, store food, and support specialists such as builders, priests, and artisans. When harvests failed, the consequences were severe. Maize therefore occupied a rare position. It was both ordinary food and a symbol of cosmic importance. Its kernels were practical, but its meaning was enormous. After the Columbian Exchange, maize moved far beyond the Americas. It adapted to new regions and farming systems across Africa, Europe, and Asia. Its global spread was helped by several strengths. Maize can produce a large amount of grain per plant. It can be bred into many varieties for different climates, colors, textures, and uses. It can serve as human food, animal feed, and industrial raw material. In some regions, maize became a major staple because it delivered high yields and could be integrated into local cuisines. But its spread also changed diets and economies. A crop born from indigenous American knowledge became part of global agriculture, sometimes feeding communities, sometimes feeding livestock, and sometimes feeding industrial demand rather than people directly. The maize plant itself is built around a striking division of roles. The tall leafy stalk produces tassels at the top, which are the male inflorescences that release pollen. Lower on the plant, the ears are the female inflorescences. Each silk on an ear connects to a potential kernel. For a full ear to form, pollen must reach those silks, allowing kernels to develop in rows along the cob. This structure helps explain why maize fields often seem uniform and carefully arranged. Pollination, spacing, and plant density all matter. Modern commercial varieties are usually yellow or white, but maize can be far more visually diverse, with red, blue, purple, black, and multicolored kernels. Behind the simple image of corn is a complex reproductive system shaped by thousands of years of breeding. One reason maize dominates global production is that much of it is not eaten directly by humans. A large share becomes animal feed. Field corn can be harvested as grain, or the entire plant can be cut and stored as forage. When fermented into silage, it becomes more palatable and useful for feeding cattle and other livestock. This means maize is deeply embedded in meat and dairy production, even when consumers never see it on their plates. A steak, a glass of milk, or a processed food item may all be connected to maize through the agricultural supply chain. This also explains why maize production can grow so large. It supports not only direct human diets, but the industrial food system behind them. For direct human food, maize takes many forms. In Mexico and Central America, it is foundational for tortillas and tamales. In Italy, it becomes polenta. In the United States, it appears as hominy grits, cornbread, popcorn, and sweet corn. But not all maize is the same. Sweet corn is bred for sugar content and is usually eaten as a vegetable, fresh or canned. Field corn is starchier and is typically processed into cornmeal, masa, starch, syrup, oil, or feed. Masa is especially important because it connects to nixtamalization, an alkali treatment developed in Mesoamerica. This process improves flavor, texture, and nutrition, making maize more suitable for staple diets. Food cultures around maize are therefore also technologies of preparation. Maize has a nutritional complication that shaped history. Its protein is low in some essential amino acids, and the niacin it contains is not easily available unless the grain is treated with alkali. In Mesoamerica, nixtamalization solved this problem by soaking and cooking maize in an alkaline solution, often using lime. This made nutrients more available and helped create dough suitable for tortillas and tamales. But when maize spread to places where people adopted the crop without the processing method, diets based too heavily on untreated maize could become nutritionally risky. This is a powerful reminder that crops do not travel alone. The knowledge of how to prepare them matters as much as the seed itself. Maize was never just a plant, it was part of a cultural technology. Beyond the kitchen and the feedlot, maize is an industrial crop. It can be processed into cornstarch, corn syrup, corn oil, alcoholic beverages such as bourbon whiskey, and chemical feedstocks. It is also used to produce ethanol and other biofuels. This flexibility makes maize valuable, but it also raises questions about priorities. When a crop can feed people, fatten animals, sweeten processed foods, fuel vehicles, and supply industry, its production becomes tied to markets, subsidies, energy policy, and global trade. A field of maize may look simple, but economically it sits at the intersection of food, fuel, livestock, and manufacturing. That is one reason maize is so widely planted. Almost every part of the modern economy can find a use for it. High production also brings vulnerability. Maize is attacked by many pests and diseases, and some have caused enormous losses. In the United States, two major insect pests, the European corn borer and corn rootworms, have each been associated with annual losses of around $1 billion. These threats matter because modern agriculture often depends on large areas planted with similar varieties. That scale can increase efficiency, but it can also give pests and diseases a huge target. Farmers respond with crop rotation, pesticides, resistant varieties, monitoring, and breeding programs. The struggle is constant. Maize may be globally dominant, but it is not invincible. Its success depends on ongoing defense against organisms that have evolved to feed on it. Modern plant breeding has transformed maize yields and traits. Breeders select for productivity, nutrition, drought tolerance, and resistance to pests and diseases. In recent decades, much maize has also been genetically modified, especially in large commercial systems. Genetic modification can introduce traits such as insect resistance or herbicide tolerance, changing how farmers manage fields. Supporters point to yield protection and efficiency. Critics raise concerns about corporate control, ecological effects, herbicide use, and dependence on specialized seed systems. The reality is that maize sits at the center of modern debates about biotechnology because it is so important. Any change to maize affects not just farmers, but food prices, livestock systems, ecosystems, and industrial supply chains. The most remarkable thing about maize is that its power comes from dependence. It relies on humans for propagation, and humans rely on it for food, feed, and industry. That mutual dependence began with ancient farmers selecting seeds from teosinte, and it continues today in laboratories, grain elevators, kitchens, and global markets. Maize is a crop, a commodity, a cultural symbol, and a technological achievement. It shows how agriculture can reshape a species until the plant and the people become inseparable partners. When we look at an ear of corn, we are not just looking at food. We are looking at 9,000 years of human choice, adaptation, ritual, science, and trade packed into rows of kernels. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.